Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of How to Paint. Today we're painting Count Dooku from Star Wars Shatterpoint by Atomic Mass Games. I love the sculpts on these minis, and this is one of my favorite characters, so let's get into it. To begin with, I've assembled the miniature, and I've primed it in black, followed by a zenithal of a grey and a white. And because I've limited myself to just 45 degrees on the white, it creates this lovely gradient. I've picked out some flesh tones from Scale Color here, and starting things off with a pink flesh. I'm just making sure I get coverage on all of the face and the ears here. Next I'm using a coal black, and I'm just dotting the pupils and using a grey to get the whites of the eyes. It can be pretty delicate, so I'm just going back in with the pink flesh just to tidy up. Next we're switching over to some speed paint, starting with dark wood and some Speedpaint Medium. I'm mixing this roughly 1:1 and applying this quite liberally to the cape. I'm also pulling the paint downwards just to help accentuate some of those highlights. And where the paint is pooling, I'm using the brush just to wick off some of that excess. Here I'm applying some of the dark wood mix to the pants. And oh boy, did I make a mistake coming up here. So I decided to use a heat gun to help speed up the process, but I didn't realize how powerful that would be. It ended up curling and melting his saber. So not too discouraged, I ended up snipping off the saber, replacing it with a sewing pin, and then covering it in UV cure resin. I don't think the repair's too bad, but man, was this disheartening. Not to be discouraged, I went back to painting the flesh on the hands. And here I'm using Grim Black with some medium and some extra medium just to help thin down where it gets too thick. I'm also applying this to the boots as well. I'm just touching up the back of the neck with some of the pink flesh. Here I'm mixing the basic flesh and the pink flesh together and applying that to most of the face. I'm taking care to hit the major areas like the cheekbones and the nose. And now I'm layering on top with pure basic flesh. I'm not doing as big of an area of highlights. With every layer I'm just shrinking down what I'm actually highlighting. Now for the next layer I'm using pale skin and basic flesh mixed together. And here I'm just focusing on the forehead, the tip of the nose, and the cheeks. And lastly, I'm just using pure pale skin for just the most extreme areas of highlight. Next I'm using dark stone, and I'm just applying this to his eyebrows. It's pretty delicate, so I'm just using the edge of the brush here just to catch the sculpt. Now I'm using petroleum grey and highlighting with ash grey, and I'm mixing the two together just to create the same technique as the face, where I'm just building up in layers, building up in highlights. So this is starting with the petroleum grey on the beard. And now I've mixed in just a little bit of ash grey just to help bring that up in tone. And with each layer I'm just adding more ash grey and eventually building this up to a white. Just gradually building up until I'm using pure ash grey. Yeah, I'm covering the Saber in the bold titanium white by Pro Acryl. And I'm using some of that coal black just to help reinforce the shadows on his tunic. I'm using ash grey here to help the highlights that were just kind of washed out by the contrast paint. I'm using Mournfang brown for his belt. And here was some Rinox hide mixed with the Mournfang brown and a white. And I'm just using that just to help the ridges on the cape here, just to punch those highlights a little bit more. Here I'm using Nuln oil and just applying that quite thick onto the end of the cape there, dampening the brush and feathering the edge of that shade. Now I'm switching over to the airbrush and I'm starting off with sky blue, and I'm just using this just to help get some nice gradient coverage on the lightning. Now I'm switching over to navy blue and just building up that color. And I'm mixing in Trollslayer orange whenever I need to punch the saturation of the red, rather than the white. I am using the white, however, to highlight the lightning. Here I'm applying some sky blue, just to the arms and the wrinkles in the clothing. I'm being quite bold here, but I think it adds kind of a cool animated series effect. I'm using a fairly thinned down white here just to add some glow to the saber, and then I'll rinse my brush and then feather the edge of that. I'll also reinforce the end of the saber here with some more of the pure red. I thinned down some of the red and I'm applying it like a glaze on top of the sleeve here and the edge of the cape. And here I'm applying some pretty loose highlights to the hilt. Here I'm adding some Nuln oil just to help boost some of that contrast with the glow. And then applying that to the cape's clasp here. I'm adding some pretty sketchy highlights to the boots. These are just very quick grey gradients. I'm just building up in grey to a pure white and just being pretty fast and loose with what I'm actually highlighting on here. I'm shading the belt with Agrax Earthshade. And for the base, I'm starting off with a Necromancer cloak and then dry brushing ash grey. I'm painting the rim of the base with the black. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out, but I just wanted to add a couple more finishing touches. Here I'm using a Guilliman blue, and this is a glaze, but you can water down most blues to get the same effect if you don't have this at paint. And I'm just feathering the edge with some water here. I'm adding some final touches with some blue and some white to the lightning. And I'm taking a flesh wash and just gently applying that to the back of the neck and the cheeks on the face. Lastly, I'm mixing some fuchsia with some pink flesh here and just highlighting his lip. And there we have it, Count Dooku is finished. It was pretty scary there for a minute when the saber broke, but I feel like he turned out pretty okay and he's ready for some matches of Star Wars Shatterpoint. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Let's Paint. This is a fairly new channel, so I really appreciate any kind of like, subscribe or comment. Thank you so much for watching, happy painting and happy gaming.